You are listening to the Game Global podcast, hosted by Kieran Callum.
Best advice ever.
So, hello everyone, and welcome once again to another episode of the Game Global podcast. I'm Kieran, and as I always say, this is the show that's here to give you some free tips, tools, and resources that you can use to smash your dating, your romantic, your sexual goals. Now, with me, I've got someone who I'm very excited to have. This is Alex from playingwithfire.com, playingfire.com, and he is, as far as I'm concerned, the best man I've seen when it comes to meeting women online.
Thank you, sir.
I mean that as well. You're the best I've seen, you know? And it's absolutely awesome to have you here. I've been watching your videos for at least a year now. I've gotten tons of great value from them. I've learnt a few tips and tricks as a result. You know, I've learned some tips and tricks from your stuff. So it's great to have you here so that...
Thank you for having me on, man. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, firstly, how did you get involved in game in general? Like, what's your story? Do you have a similar story of me, which is that I was a complete loser who had zero success whatsoever and just hated it until the point where I snapped and one day went crazy and started learning stuff? Is that similar to you?
Yeah, I was a young black man growing up, and no, I mean, like, I didn't lose my virginity until I was 19. So, some guys think that I'm like a natural or something like that. Far from it. I was awkward all throughout until like my mid-20s. But basically, it was at the age of 20. One of my really good buddies, he was like, "Dude, you gotta check out this book." It was called The Game. I was like, "Oh, this sounds like some gay pickup shit. Like, these guys are weird." He's like, No. Like, read the book. And I remember I kept putting it off. And then one night, I think I was just bored, and I just picked it up, and I read it in one sitting. So I sat down, started reading it. I didn't get up. I 4 hours. I just went right through it. And to me, it, like, kind of blew my mind. Because for the longest time, I thought that I was like the only guy that didn't understand how to get laid. It was like my little embarrassing secret that I couldn't really talk to anyone about. Like, I never could, like, in those days, bring up to my buddy, like, "Hey man, how do you, like, at least not directly, how do you hook girls? How do you get girls to go out with you?" Like, that would be like too embarrassing for me. So sometimes maybe I would beat around the bush, but I would never actually directly ask for, feedback or help. And so when I read that book, I was like, oh shit, I'm not the only one. Like, this is not just my weird little secret. There's a lot of other guys who have the same problem. A lot of them sound like they're even worse off than me. So it wasn't like it was just fucking rosy from there on. I still had to go out and, like, learn a lot of shit. I mean, initially I tried doing, like, mystery method, which failed horribly for me because it's just not my style at all. But that's kind of how it started.
Yeah. I resonate with that a lot. I actually lost my virginity at 19 as well. And my story is exactly the same as yours, except for the fact that I discovered David D'Angelo's Double Your Dating.
Okay.
I remember I'm surfing online one night, and I was most likely looking at porn, most likely. But then I came across this ad, and it said, "Everything you know about women is
Before
wrong."
you jerk off, click this link.
Yeah, and you know what? Thank God I did, because he took me to this page, and he had like a little tiny sample of the book. I read that captivated me. Then I found myself spending, it was probably like $20, but I don't think I had much more than that in my card at the time. I was broke, but I downloaded the book, and I couldn't put it down. I couldn't. I stayed up till like 6 a.m. reading this thing. It's like, oh my God, I've been so wrong. And then, I've never changed ever since. So,
Did you ever feel like you were the only one who, like, didn't have it figured out? Did you ever have that feeling that you were like...
yeah. No. 1,000%. And I'll tell you something else that was actually kind of bad is, like, I grew up around guys that were cool.
Yeah, me too.
So, like, my cousins and my best friends, Same. Like... When I was about 15, 16, my cousin and all of his friends, they were doing things like stealing cars and, like, selling drugs and shit like that. Right? They were doing stuff that seems really cool when you're a teenager. And they were getting girls. Like, they were doing day game well before it was even a term. They would just see girls in the street and run up to them and talk to them. They just did that. Without any training. And, like, I always wanted to be able to do that. I always wanted that confidence. And I just felt like it was just me. It literally felt like the entire world was in on a joke that I personally didn't get. That's actually how it felt. I don't know if it felt like that for you.
Something very similar. I remember this memory very much sticks out. So freshman year of college, I'm still a virgin, and I had this one friend, Nick, right, who actually right now is openly married to another man. But anyway, that's a quick aside. So at the time,
Good for you, Nick.
He was straight or whatever, and he was like the biggest dork ever. And I remember me and him went to a party, right? Like this was like the first or second week of college. And I was having a beer or something. I look over and he's making out with a girl. I was like, what the fuck? Like I felt so bad because this fucking dork was getting more girls than I was. And then I remember after the party, I was like, yo, how did you do that? He's like, what? He's like, you were like making out with that girl. He's like, yeah, we just had a good conversation. And then, I kissed her. I was like, whoa. Like, this just like didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, all right, back up here, homie. You kissed her? Like, sounds way too easy. How do you make out with a drunk girl at a college party? This is some voodoo magic.
There was a girl I really liked. I met her in a club. I'm in a club and I'm absolutely hammered. I'm drunk. I'm 18 and I see this girl. And because I'm so drunk, I've got all of this extra confidence. So I'm walking up to her. She's with her two sisters. I'm like, oh my God, you're so beautiful. You're so fit. Oh my God, yeah. And I had enough confidence to keep her interested, but I think I was like clearly going in a little bit too hard. But anyway, the point is though, she was like kind of, yeah, whatever. She was intrigued. She was, but not enough. Anyway, at the end of the night, I end up kissing her sister. And outside the club, she sees me passionately kissing her sister. And she walks up to me like, oh my God, you're full of shit. I can't believe you did that. But then at the time, I actually ended up getting her number. And at the time, I'm like, whoa, that's really crazy. I can't believe that actually happened. That doesn't make any sense. Although looking back, it kind of does make sense because clearly I kissed a sister that gave me some kind of social proof, etc. But then I wanted this girl to be my girlfriend. But she was like, look, we're gonna see each other, but it's gonna be on my terms. It's gonna be on my terms. Me being silly little 18-year-old Kieran, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, it will be on your terms. So we met up a couple times, and because I was absolutely terrified of rejection and she said she wanted things to be on her terms, I just kind of hang back and I thought, well, she's going to kiss me when she wants to, isn't she? Because it's going to be on her terms. So obviously, if I sit back and be respectful, that's going to be totally fine. And then I ended up friend zoning myself, and then she didn't want me at all, and it was so painful. It was really painful.
Those are the worst feelings, dude. I can one up this story. At least you got to make out with a sister. All right, so listen to this shit. So freshman year of college, this is like halfway through the year, and my friend group, Nick was a part of. It was mostly guys, and there was one chick here, right? So whatever, I'll name drop her. It's a common name, Sarah, right? So a bunch of dudes and Sarah, and I remember I had a crush on Sarah. She had big tits, I had a crush on her, right? And I remember that she was hooking up with one of the guys in our group, and then they had a little falling out or whatever. And so one night we're all hanging out, right? Except for the guy that she used to hook up with, who she had a falling out with. And this was our dorm, and her dorm was literally 5 minutes away, walking super close. And she's like, yeah, it's getting late. She's like, I really shouldn't walk back. Maybe I should just crash here. And all the guys were like, oh, you can stay with me. You can stay with me. And then I'm just the only one who's just quietly sitting there drinking my beer. And she's like, no, I think I'll stay with Alex, right? Alex, you told me I could stay there. I was like, sure, if you want. Yeah. And she's like, yeah, it'll be good. I don't want to walk back. It's late. I'll just sleep. I'll sleep in Alex's room. And so all my buddies were like, So we go to my room, and because she said I'll sleep in Alex's room, I thought she literally just wanted to sleep because she said sleep. She didn't say have sex with Alex. She said sleep in Alex's room. So we get to my room, and I'm like, hey, so you want me to set you up on the floor, or I move some pillows? She's like, we can just sleep in your bed. Right, there's enough room. I was like, okay, if you're so sure. So we get in bed right next to each other, tiny bed, and she's just laying there with her eyes open, just waiting for it. And I just look at her and say, good night, and I go to sleep. And then I wake up the next day, and she's already gone, I think, at this point. And then I see my friend group, and they're like, yo, how was that pussy, man? I was like, what are you guys talking about? She said she wants to go to sleep. They're like, dude, you do realize that she was trying to bang you. I was like, you think? No. And then that feeling I felt when I realized that she actually wanted to fuck me and I just completely fucked it up was the worst. And after that, I never got a shot with her.
Yeah, it's a painful, sad experience. It's painful and sad. You know something? The fact how subtle women are is something that it took me so long to realize, and it's cost me so much, caused me so much pain over the years. It's like in that moment, she's in her head, she's screaming and she's saying, "Please touch me, please do something." But all that comes out is, "Well, I'll sleep in your room. I'll sleep in your room." And then the thing is, you're raised to be a decent guy. You're raised to be courteous and respectful and to not be a creep.
Speak for yourself, man. I was raised to be a savage. No, I'm just kidding. I was raised to be polite and all that. Like, yeah, we were like kind of like.
Yeah. So you don't want to treat her like a whore. You don't want to disrespect her. Of course not. She's a decent, courteous, self-respecting young woman. So if she says she wants to sleep with you in the bed, that's actually all she wants to do.
Yeah, it's a failure to like pick up on what's actually going on. You're looking at life very surface level. You're not looking under the surface. And usually like all the good stuff is under the surface, because very few girls are going to be like, "Hey Alex, so you want to make a move on me now, or you want to put your dick inside of me?" Like, that's almost never going to happen. The best you're going to get is, "So yeah, I can just in your bed." Like, you're not going to get much better than that.
Well, that actually brings me on to something, because what I have noticed from your text game is that you very much go under the surface. So the woman is saying one thing, but you're saying another. I remember times when you've been breaking down like your students, Tinder chats and whatnot, where you will actually spot like, okay, so when she said this right here, she actually wanted to meet up with you in this moment right here. But you didn't actually pick up on that. So you're actually, there's the way most guys actually look at this is, okay, so she said, "Hello, how are you?" And he's like, "Fine, how are you?" And she's like, "I'm really tired." And he's just, the only meaning he's reading from it is, "I'm really tired." Whereas something I've noticed, and something you've clearly noticed as well, is like, there is the thing that she says, but then there's a deeper meaning underneath. So my question to you is, well, actually, let's just use this to try and to like bring this round into like online gaming, meeting women through Tinder match, etc. What do guys not know that they need to know? And what kind of changes should guys be making in order to do better with regards to meeting women on these platforms?
Oh man, you just opened up a can of worms. Is it?
That's why we're here.
Do you want me to answer specifically related to looking under the surface, or just in general when it comes to tech?
You know what? Let's go in general.
All right. So, so where you kind of touched up is a big thing. You have to look under the surface, right? You can't always. Actually, you should almost never take text at face value. Now, of course, you don't want to go too far. Like sometimes, like everything in life, there's like a scale, right? So you want to look at things under the surface, but you don't want to be OCD, because sometimes I see the other extreme, and the guy's like, "She said, I'll see you tomorrow. Good night." What is she flaking on me? Like, what? Like guys are like trying to overanalyze and like coming up with these crazy theories, like, and that's who killed JFK. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? So so you don't want to do that. So basically, look things under the surface. Don't overthink. Don't be overly gamey. That's the biggest mistake I see by far. Like, if 80% of the guys in my mastermind group, once I get them to stop being overly gamey, like, their success increases significantly. So to explain what over gaminess is, because I get this question a lot, think of texting and just interactions like a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you have super boring, like, hey, what's up? Hey, how's your day? Hey, how are you? And I think most guys in the pickup community, they're aware that's bad. You don't want to be super boring, right? Unfortunately, the mistake they make is they go too far in the other direction, right? So where they're trying so hard to be overly witty, overly funny, like overly just like, I don't know, exciting, that it comes off like just gamey and kind of cringe, right? It's just too far in the other direction. So I always tell guys to walk the path like somewhere around here. A little bit of get to know you stuff is okay. Like, I will ask girls, are you from here originally? Like, stuff like that. That's okay to ask basic questions, because if you're only ever cracking jokes, then when you go to meet up, the chick might be like, okay, this guy's kind of funny, but I don't think he's serious, right? So yeah, so find that middle ground. Another huge thing is get investment, right? So a lot of guys think like, okay, how do I get a girl how do I attract a girl over text? How do I build comfort over text? I don't do really any of that unless it's necessary. I think of text game really just in terms of one thing mainly. Like my goal when I'm vibing with a girl, aside from screening her, like if there's something that seems off, like she's a little prude or whatever, but like is mainly to just get her invested in the conversation. So I want to get to the point where she's writing paragraphs. Because then, if she's invested in the conversation, when I go to meet up, my chances of getting the meetup and getting the meetup on my terms, which is like her coming over instead of her being like, oh, why don't you come to me, is going to be a lot higher than if I just go for the close, before she's invested. And then I would say the last big thing is a huge mistake I see is not closing optimally. So there's an optimal way to close, and it's really not that hard. Really, it's the general formula that I recommend is soft close, which I would say we should get together sometime soon. Right? The girl would say, sure. Then you go for this. You try to figure out her logistics. So then you would say, what's your schedule like? The chick might say, oh, I'm free Tuesday and Thursday nights after 8. And then you would say, cool, let's do Thursday night at 8:30, right? Say 8:30 question mark, right? So it's 3 steps really, but these 3 steps make a big difference rather than just saying, hey, you want to hang out Thursday at 8:30, right? Because a lot of guys, their attempts at closing are just like throwing darts blindly at a dartboard. When you say, like with no information about her schedule, you say, hey, want to get together tomorrow at 8:30, you're assuming that 1, she's free at that time. She might legitimately want to see you, but she's just not free at that time. And then she doesn't want to say no, she doesn't want to turn you down because she likes you, so maybe she just doesn't respond. Like you have all these situations that don't need to happen if guys just do a little bit more diligence and just close optimally. So I see that all the time. It's like a big mistake guys make. Like a girl will start getting interested in the conversation, they're investing, maybe the girl is sending them pics or sexting them, and then the guy just says, hey, what are you doing later tonight at 8 o'clock? Can you come over? And then you just enter negative compliance.
You mentioned investment a little while ago. So what strategies do you specifically employ in order to get a woman invested in a conversation?
Sure. So I think investment comes down primarily to 2 things. One is relevance, right? So, for example, let's say, to me, YouTube is really relevant. So if a random guy comes up to me, or I'm at a party and some random guy starts talking to me about the YouTube algorithm or, YouTube policies or something like that, that's going to be very relevant to me. I'm going to be very engaged. However, most girls who don't have YouTube channels, they don't give a shit, right? You start talking about YouTube, and where something is very relevant to me, it might not be relevant at all to the other person. So the conversation has to be relevant to her. For example, if she has a lot of tattoos, then that's a topic that she's going to be interested in, right? Like I found, whenever I see a picture of a girl with a dog, I always say, is that your dog, right? Because if a girl is into dogs, it's going to be very relevant to her. It's going to be something that she's passionate about, right? She's going to be much more likely to talk to you about conversation that's very relevant to what's going on in her life. That's the first part of it. Second component of this is perceived value. So think about it this way. A homeless guy comes up to you and he starts talking to you about random shit, right? His perceived value, as bad as it sounds, is very low. So even if he's talking about something that's very relevant to you, you're probably not going to give a shit. Versus if Leonardo DiCaprio comes up to you, starts talking about the same thing, his perceived value is super high. So you're going to be much more engaged in the conversation. So you want to maintain a high perceived value, and that's mainly through good pictures, not saying anything retarded in your text. You can very easily lower your perceived value through bad text game, through being needy, through being overly boring, overly, uncalibrated. So just by having a high perceived value and being relevant in what you say, you're going to get investment from the girl.
You touched on something very important there where you said to actually make the conversation relevant to her. Because something I learned years ago, and this has nothing to do with game directly, but it's like everyone is tuned into a specific radio station called WIIFM. What's in it for me?
Yep, exactly.
And that when you want to connect with somebody, you find like an emotional trigger, and you use that as a basis to actually stimulate a conversation. And I find that works incredibly well. So whenever I'm speaking to women, I always try to pick out things about them. Like I was talking to this one woman the other day, and I said, your profile tells a story. And she said, I'm not sure if that was sarcasm. I said, no. You like to work out, you're proud of your body, but you don't want to sexualize yourself. You love travel, and you're passionate about dogs. And she's like, oh my God, that's like the best message I've ever had. And my question to you is, for the average guy who actually isn't that good at, let's say, let's say, working out what's going on underneath the surface, or analyzing people, or looking at a woman and saying, okay, you're probably this kind of person, therefore I should speak about this. What kind of thing should a guy be looking at when he's like going through some woman's profile in order to get bait for a conversation? Because something that I have found, and you must have found this as well, it's like, this is one of the things that's just kind of unfair about online dating, is a lot of women don't put any effort into their profile. None. And it's, they expect a man to come up with this witty first message, but there's no bait in the profile for the witty first message, at least not from most women anyway. It's just like series of selfies or whatever. So what is a guy looking for in order to...
You touched on a few things, so let me just unpack everything, because I think there's a lot of stuff here. So first of all, what you did was a cold read, and it was effective cold read. Cold reads can be very good at, basically the girl feels like, oh my God, he knows me. Now, as you said, for a guy who's really new to game, they might have a hard time doing cold reads because they just can't tell. So practice is always good. You can't be afraid to fail. So you get good at doing cold reads by practicing. But cold reads are only one of the ways to get investment. They're very effective way if they're done right, but it's not like the only way. It's not like the end all be all. So again, another thing is you can just go off obvious stuff. Like, does a chick have a picture of a dog, right? Like, you don't need to be really that fucking, that really good at game to figure out, okay, if she has a dog, then she probably likes dogs. If she has tattoos, she probably likes tattoos, If she travels a lot, then she probably likes to travel. So you can bring up stuff like that. You can also have like just canned lines that you use. So one I personally use is, are you from here originally? And I like that because I think it's also going to work really well in, you're in London, right?
Birmingham. It's just slightly north of London.
Okay, yeah, but like it's probably a very international city. So basically, like stuff like, are you from here originally? Because people are passionate about their roots. People are passionate about stuff like that. So I like that question. If the girl's not giving me much in the conversation, I'm like, hey, trouble. She's like, hi. And then it's just like one word answers. I'll go with that. Are you from here originally? And then the trick will be like, oh, actually, I moved here from blah, 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 and I was living blah, blah, blah. And that just kind of gets the thread going. There's a bunch of you could go through some of my layer reports, on our Instagram or YouTube, but there's a lot of little things like that you can use as well. Now, in terms of the, what you mentioned is how it's unfair. Yes, so the sexual marketplace is not favorable. And again, this is just, I look at this as just a reality. It's just like a fact. You know what else is not fucking fair? Like taxes, right? Because we pay 40-50% taxes and we don't really get shit. So there's a lot of things in life that are just kind of unfair, but you just kind of have to accept it. Now, the sexual marketplace is going to vary based on how attractive you are. So if you're who's a famous English person, David Beckham or something like that, the sexual marketplace is going to be very much in your favor, right? So that, but also if you go to say Colombia, Southeast Asia, then you're going to see girls putting a lot more effort because it's more competitive. So the sexual marketplace there. The reason girls get lazy with their profiles is because they can just have 2 bad selfies and they'll still have plenty of guys who are offering them dick. So if you go to a place like Southeast Asia where there's not as many guys or these attractive guys offering them dick, then you're going to see girls putting in much more of an effort. Same thing, I've noticed when I was traveling in Medellin. So but anyway, I just kind of accept it as a fact and just work around it basically.
Let's say you got some woman with the couple of bad selfies. What should a guy look for in her profile to see something that he can comment on that will spark her investment and then start to get her interested in the conversation?
So just to quick clarify, I don't think there's one magic line that will do the trick or anything like that. But for example, if she just has, and I don't think that the opener, so I think the opener should always be something very simple. So I don't like to do big, complex things off the opener. But say, okay, so an opener that I've been using recently with a lot of success is, hey, I like your style, right? Very simple, very straightforward, right? And the trick might say, thank you, whatever, thank you, awesome, I like yours too. Now let's say she has four pictures and they're all just retarded selfies. They're all gym selfies. I might say something like, I especially like your gym selfie collection, right? Because then at that point she's like, wait, is he trolling me? Is he serious? It's like a playful tease. You know what I mean? So I might say something like that. If she has like a picture of her wearing like a John sombrero, I say, I like your hat. It's a little bit too small for my taste though, or something like that. Again, like just kind of just riffing off what she says. But also, you don't feel like you have to do that if you're a beginner. You can just stick to pretty basic questions like, are you from here originally? She might be like, oh, blah blah blah, and then whatever. She might say, oh, I'm from Brazil actually. I'm say, oh, cool. I'm somewhere really close, Russia, right? Again, like such super simple joke. She'd be like, haha, yeah, that's very close, and then just kind of riff off that,
I hear you. So, let's say you're on the date with this woman. She's agreed to meet up with you. You've gone for a walk in the park. You've met up in a bar, whatever the hell you're doing.
Straight to my place for a bottle of wine. That's typically 50 or so.
Okay. So she's round at your place. Mm-hmm. The bottle of wine has been cracked open. You got. So what are you doing now? What is your process to go through in order to build comfort with this woman and also keep the attraction high and end up sealing the deal?
Mm-hmm. So my big thing is I always assume attraction. So you'll never really see me like, and this may sound like a subtle nuance, but I think it could be, it's like an internal thing, right? Like I never think like, oh, I need to get this chick attracted to me. I just assume she's attracted, right? That's generally just like the assumption I go in. Now, sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. But anyway, so chick gets to my place. A big part of it is I'll just go off her general body language, how comfortable she is. Is she sitting, is she very open, or is she kind of sitting like this, right? So if she seems closed off, then I'm not going to escalate. Obviously, I'm going to give it some time. I'm going to drink some wine, crack some jokes, play some music, maybe offer, be like, oh, hey, do you know how to dance? And oh, Colombians are the best dancers and like try dancing. So I'll escalate much more like that. Now, if she seems like she's open, like you can just almost tell when a chick is radiating DTF. Sometimes you don't have to do any of that. Sometimes I'll literally start escalating after 5 minutes. Like I'll take her on my balcony, I'll stand behind her, I'll put my hand on her hip, and I'll just like start escalating like that. So sometimes it'll take me an hour to make a move. Sometimes it'll take me like 4 or 5 minutes. And just a big part of that is going to be the girl's body language and how comfortable she seems.
So you said that you get girls back to your place immediately for the first date. Now, is that a case where you've been, let's say, sexting the girl and then you've said, all right, come round, and she's really horny, so she gets swept up in that sea of emotions? Or is this a case where you said, okay, come round to my place tomorrow, and she's had time to sit down and reflect and think about it?
Much more of the latter. So I used to... So my text game has like evolved a little bit. Now, 3-4 years ago, I was doing a lot more sexting, but actually I found that I prefer to be a little bit more implicit. So now my text game will be just more like subtle innuendos rather than just outright sexting. And the reason for that is with sexting, sometimes you get like anti-slut defense last minute, but it's much more of the latter. So it's rare. I mean, it happens for sure, but like it's not that often where it's like, hey, come over tonight, 8 p.m. We just match, and then a few hours later she's coming over. It's much more like I get her over like, you know, hey, what's your schedule like? Oh, cool, Thursday. Let's do Thursday at 8. So it's much more of that rather than just like striking while the iron's hot. Of course, those opportunities do come. It's important to capitalize on those, but I would feel like 80% of my results is more from scheduling and planning.
Do you think part of why you're able to do that is because of either geographical location, like where you are and the sorts of women that are there?
No, definitely not. Yeah, definitely not, because I've traveled around the world and I've done this in every place. So I've never been to England, but I'm sure it's not that different from, well, I mean, it probably is, but I've been to Poland, I've been to Finland, I've been to Hungary, I've been to Romania, I've been to Colombia. I haven't been everywhere, but I've been to a good amount of places. And the strategy works everywhere. To give you a quick example, I used to think, so Colombia, like it's much more like there's kidnapping risk there and there's all these like safety things. So I thought that when I went to Colombia, I was like, there's no way these chicks are gonna be down to come straight over, not because, they're more prude, but just simply because of the, all the safety risk, right? And so my first trip to Colombia, I went in with that mindset that, I always have to do public dates, And then my second trip, I was with a buddy, and he's like, why don't you invite them straight over like you always do? I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I'm like, oh shit, this works here too. Like, it works. Again, there's going to be a certain amount of girls who won't come straight over, like who want to meet in public. And that's fine, I'll meet them in public. But I always am going to make an attempt first to get them straight over, and if not, then I'll meet them at a bar nearby.
You know what? You're making me realize that maybe I have had like a mental block or like an assumption of how I've been looking at things, because my assumption is basically being the fact that, okay, yeah, these women, they're scared of being raped, they're scared of X, Y, and Z, they're scared of you being a creep, da 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 da. So more often than not, unless you whip them up into an emotional frenzy there and then, and it's like, okay, I'm coming over tonight, I'm coming over in the next 20 minutes, unless it's something like that, actually what you'd need to do is meet her in public and then bounce her to different locations, build up the attraction, etc., whip her up into the sea of frenzy and emotions again, make her feel comfortable with you, then take her home with you on that day.
Yep. So that's definitely like a little bit of a limiting mindset. Like, I was the exact same way when I went to Colombia my first trip. Like, exactly what you're saying is how I felt. I was like, oh, there's all these narco traffickers and there's all this kidnapping and shit. Why would any girl come straight over? Like, no way. Maybe this works in America and Europe, but it's not going to work here. Like, that was the mindset I had, and then my second trip just completely shattered it.
Is there anything specific that you like to say when you're with a woman in order to move things from point A to point B? Or is it completely riffing in the moment? The reason I say that is because for the most part, I'm like 90% in the moment and vibing. But there are certain things that I like to say, which I know that if I do say them, it's really going to help. And then I kind of subconsciously wait for the right opportunity to say these things. Like, one great example is, I know that when I was at college, there was a time when I was at college when I was with a girl and some guy walked past us and shoved her and she fell over.
Shit.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't do it deliberately, to be fair, but whatever. Anyway, I confronted him and she really liked that because I was protecting her. So I mention that when I'm with women, for obvious reasons, because the implication is that if you're with me, then if some man tries something with you, then I will protect you. But of course, I'm just telling the story of something happened back then. So then she's like, oh, so he's a protector. So all the times when I've been in a club and some guys grabbed my butt, if he was there, if Kieran was there, he would defend me and he'd punch that guy in the face. Yeah. So I always tell that story. It's not a lie, but it's something I've kind of got in my head to tell. Do you have anything like that, or are you just...
I would say I'm like 98, 99% in the moment. I wouldn't say it's so much things I say, it's more like things I do that are pretty much like a pattern. Like, one thing I'll do is, girl comes over, pours both a wine, and then I'll say, let's go on the balcony, right? So we'll go on the balcony, and part of this I'm going to adjust based on her body language. What I like to do, what I sense comfort, is I actually stand behind her and put my arms like that, and then I just hold the sexual tension. It's not like I make a move right away. And I just stand there like this while carrying on the conversation completely normal, whatever the fuck we're talking about, whether it's something super platonic or super sexual. And just doing that, you can just see her, like, the sexual tension build. So I'm a big believer in just like building sexual tension. Like, you'll never see me just like going for the make out as my first move. That's not how I roll. Like, first I'll like put my hand on her thigh a little bit. I'll like slowly caress her a little bit. I'll like play with her hair a little bit. So it's a lot of shit that I do that's very, I would say, familiar. But I'm also gonna adjust. So for example, some chicks love to have their hair pulled. Some chicks will get turned off by that, right? Some chicks love to get choked. Some don't. So I'll always like feel out the situation. So what I like to do is I'll run my hand past her hair and just very lightly just pull it a little tiny amount, like 0.1%. And then I look at her reaction. Do her eyes light up, or does she seem like she's not into it, right? So I always probe a lot.
Okay, so that's a very interesting thing, because a lot of guys say to me, is like, how do I sexually escalate? And the thing is, what I always say is, you actually do know how to escalate, because all you basically do is you do stuff that starts off very innocent and builds to stuff you would 1,000,000,000% never want your mother to see you doing. So it's kind of like this. Would you want your mum to see you sticking your finger inside a woman? Most likely not, right? So that's like kind of at the far end of it. Would you want your mum to see you putting your hand on a woman's breast? No, but it's definitely better than, the finger inside her. Would you want your mum to see you with your hand on her knee? It's not really too bad. Like, how socially unacceptable is it? You just start at things that actually aren't that big of a deal, and then you slowly increase while checking to see if she's okay. If she's okay, then you continue going. If she's not okay, then we take a few steps back. And yeah, that is something I've learned. So personally, me, when I'm with a woman, I am pushing it the whole time. Like, I'm constantly pushing it. We're having a conversation, but there's a part of my brain, which is like 15% of my brain, is always actively moving things forward into an increasingly more sexual zone and capacity.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have that mindset. I think that's essential. I think that if every guy could adapt that mindset, you'd see a lot more dudes getting laid. It's like that. Like, let's think about this logically. Like, why do guys not escalate? Probably the biggest component of this is fear, right? Like, I think most guys in the pickup community know that when a chick comes to their place, the chick probably wants to fuck. So it's not a lack of knowledge, like kind of like I was in college. I think more of it is just fear, like fear of rejection, fear of making her uncomfortable, fear of being uncomfortable yourself, fear of even performance anxiety, even fear of success, like all these fears, and that's what kind of prevents you. So I think a big part of like improving your escalation is not so much learning something new, it's like unlearning or rewiring like just like bad mindsets and habits that you have. But also another thing you said is progressive escalation, so you're not going from like 0 to 100, you're going 0 to 5 to 10. And that's also like a huge part of a good game, right? Like everything should be smooth and progressive. It should never be like a big jump, like you're talking about puppies and then you're fucking slapping her ass, right? Like it should be very progressive. Yeah, you like those Cocker Spaniels, bitch? Bam.
I hear you, man. So, yeah, before we go, is there anything else that you believe a man who's watching this, who let's say is in Uruguay right now, or is in Medellin, and he's like, all right, I'm not getting the results that I want through online dating. Please help me. Is there anything else that he needs to know? Like any other tips, tricks, strategies, etc.?
All right, this is gonna sound a little self-serving, but honestly, just check out my content. Like I pretty much covered like more or less every single question that guys will have when it comes to online. So just check out my YouTube, check out my tips and guides. Like unfortunately, when I was starting out, like there was no playing with fire, right? So I had to like more or less like come up with a lot of this stuff came from talking to friends, from just trial and error. So there was like a lot of scattered resources. Like now you have one big resource that you can just use, and I would just start with that, honestly.
And I will also say to anyone who's listening that would be a great place to go as well, because his content is absolutely brilliant. There's a reason why you're here. There's a reason why you're here, Your content is absolutely fantastic.
Much appreciated.
So with that said, no worries, man, no worries. So with that said, that this has been an episode of the Game Global podcast. This is Alex from Playing with Fire, playingfire.com. I'm Kieran from gameglobal.net. Hope you guys have yourselves a great day, a great life. Check out his content, check out mine, and smash your dating and your sexual goals. So, goodbye.
Awesome. Take care, man.